Hello ladies and gentlemen, it's Mike here at Game From Scratch, and today we've got a bit of an informal Godot tutorial going on today. What we're going to look at is creating 3D scenes in Godot. Now this is going to bring together a number of different subjects we've learned about, and we're going to just kind of do a top level. We're going to look at how to bring in models, how to create camera, how to set up your environment, how to set up the lighting, and so on. And the reason why I did this was actually I was playing around on the weekend. I created this really simple level you can see in front of you, nothing really graphically beautiful. I'll go ahead and run it. You can see the end results of what I created. Again, this isn't something I spent a huge amount of time on. But it was just sort of playing around. And the reason why I did this is because the assets that you see being used in it were released for free, and I wanted to play with them. So everything you see here, this was all part of the Best of Polygon Game Dev bundle. And I actually covered this earlier last week, and it wasn't that useful for Godot developers because, frankly, it was Unreal and Unity only formatted. Well, since then, they've actually released it so you get the source files as well. And that makes it a hell of a lot more useful for Godot developers. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to look at creating not necessarily this exact scene that you see here, but at least all the parts of it. So we'll see things like how to set up lights, how to set up the depth of field so that when you go off into the horizon, it gets blurrier or less precise. And we've got the lighting in the scene here. We're going to look at how to bring in models, how to instance them, what that actually means, and so on. So everything you need to create something like this, you will know by the end of this video. Now, obviously, in this particular case, I'm going to go ahead and use that asset pack. Specifically, I am using the models from the Polygon Sci-Fi City Pack. So again, if you've already purchased it, you can now go to the download section and you will find there is now a sources file. But in this particular case, you can use whatever 3D models you want to make this work. So let's head on over, look at what you get when you download. So now you've got this zip file you can bring down, and it's got the source files in it, specifically the FBX and the textures collection. The FBX one, this is where we're going to get all of our models from. The FBX importer in Godot is brand new though, and I'm just going to go ahead and get rid of the characters model right here because there's something in it that causes a problem, and quite frankly, I don't need any characters for what I'm going to show you anyways. So that, we're going to get that, and we're going to get the textures. Now the cool thing about this pack is they actually reuse textures. So you see here, we have Sci-Fi, Polygon Sci-Fi 01A, but we've also got B, C, and D, and if you look in the folder, there's actually alternates, so we've got a ton more different options, and they're only slightly different, but the cool thing is you swap out one of these things, and you get a completely different look in your scene. So that's how they've set this up. Almost all of the models share a single texture source, so I'm going to show you how to set that up as well, but the first thing we obviously need to do is set up a Godot project. So let's fire up a trusty copy of Godot. Where did you go, Godot? Obviously, it's in my downloads folder because everything is either in downloads or temp on my machine. Here we go. So let's fire up Godot, like so. All right, so we got a new project. We're going to go ahead and create a new one. We will call this Game 3D Demo. Of course, as I mentioned, it either goes in downloads or it goes in temp. So create our folder. We're going to create this as an OpenGL ES3 project. Go ahead, create and edit. And boom. Okay, welcome to our world. Now, the first thing we need to do is actually import all of our assets. And this can be a little time consuming, so we'll start with that. So go to your file system section, go to the resources, right click and say open in file manager. That will open up a new Windows Explorer window for your project. And then all you need to do is head on back over to your assets folder. So go back to the source files. We want the FBX objects and we want the texture objects. Now I'm bringing in literally everything. So if you wanted to bring in one by one, you perfectly well can do that. But I just find this is a little bit easier. Just drag it over. You'll notice this is saying move. So I'm going to hold down control. So instead it's a copy. And this will copy all of the files over that we need. And now Godot is going to detect that, and it's going to start importing all of the assets. Now, this actually can take a little bit of time because it needs to import everything. Now, another thing that I can actually point out while we're here is we go back over to the assets file, you'll notice there's also OBJ files of everything we are dealing with. So you do not need to use the FBX versions. Now, the reason why I am using the FBX version instead of the OBJ version is the OBJ versions are all 100 times too big. And it's not a really big deal. You can actually, once you've imported them all in, you can just go to the import settings and apply a scale modifier and do a re-import. I just don't want to go through all that. So we're just going to go with the FBX version, let it finish doing its import. This is going to take some time, so I'm just going to go ahead and pause the video right now. By the way, if you are on Windows and the performance is absolutely garbage, go take a look at your Windows Explorer or your Task Manager and look for Windows Defender. it's probably Windows Defender. Whenever you're copying a bunch of small files, it gets really stupid and it gets really irritating. So sometimes just turn that off while you're doing this work, and you're going to find the performance is lots better. Okay, so here you can see here, we've got all of our assets are imported in. We are good to go. Now what we need to do is actually create a 3D scene to work with. So we're going to start that off. Over here in the scene viewer, just go ahead and create a 3D scene, and we'll just straight out save our scene. So we'll go ahead and save that called, I don't know what I just did. I think I just hit my trackpad. Save scene as, and we'll call it my scene. Like so. There you go. So we've got our scene. The one thing I like to commonly do, you don't need to do this, but you've always got a root node. I like just calling it root. So that's where all the world is going to be relative to. Now we can start bringing things into our world. So what we're going to do is start this off with a simple building. Now I'm going to try and match up with what I did in the other scene just so we've got consistent assets, but you can use whatever buildings you particularly want. So let's go ahead and we'll bring in the bank. So we could come in here, we'll just search for bank. As you can see, there are an absolute ton of assets in this particular pack. What we want to do is bring in SM building bank, like this guy, and just drop it into the scene. So there you see our model is now in the scenes, but the problem is when you import a model into the Godot game engine, you're kind of getting a read-only version of it. So if it doesn't look exactly like what you want it to do, that's probably not going to work for you. So all these FBX files are ready to use if you like exactly how they are, but you see no texture on this guy. We might want to add some logic to it at some point in time. So obviously that's not going to work for us. So what we instead have to do is select it and then go here. Just click this guy right here and say we want to create a new inherited version. What this does is creates a scene out of that FBX file. So you see here, it's actually a hierarchy of different things that were used together. And then we can now go ahead and work with this guy. So it's the top level one that we want to work with. This guy has, so this is for dealing with it in general. And this is the model and material and so on. Now the interesting thing with this guy here and in general with this pack, because as I mentioned, they all share a single texture file or a set of files. So what we need to do now is set up those textures. And we can do this two ways. We can do this as a single material that we share between all of them. And as long as we're not doing any dynamic changes or whatever, that'll make life so much faster or quicker. So I'll show you both ways. So later on, we can show you customizing a single individual material if we want to do some tweaks or changes to it. All right, so first thing to know is we're going to come in here, we're going to create a new spatial material. So this is all the textures and all that stuff that go with it. So we're going to just double click now that we've created it. And what we want to do first is set up albedo. Albedo is your color channel. You can traditionally think of this as diffuse. And now we want to go ahead and load a texture map for that. So go down here to load and go into your textures. And now, as I mentioned earlier on, all of the sci-fi stuff is together under the same set. We can also grab something from the alternate set, but we'll go with the default here. So let's go back up a path and we'll grab Polygon Sci-Fi 01. Now you'll notice also here, Polygon Sci-Fi also has a normal map, has a metallic map, and we're going to bring those in just a second. So we're going to go ahead, we'll bring in the Sci-Fi 01 right here. So there you see, we now have textures on our model. Now, as I mentioned earlier on, there are all kinds of alternates with this pack. So what we could do is go ahead, we could have switched it out to one of the alternates. So let me scroll this down so you can see. So there is the current coloration. We switch that out and we get a completely different color set. So you can tweak it around and get the texture set that looks good in your particular scene. Also keep in mind, if you want to use different textures, you're going to have to use different materials on different objects. So let's go back to what we had there. So let's go back to the default one. So load that, back to textures, pick one, and there we're good to go. Now, as I mentioned earlier on, we also have a metallic map. So we can go down here, we can go textures, load, and then we bring in the sci-fi metallic map right here. It doesn't make a ton of detailed difference, but you can actually set the metallicness with this slider right here. Again, there probably is no map being used in this particular case. And then finally, so let's see, we got albedo defined, we got metallic defined, and there is a normal map in here. Normal maps allow you to provide more detail without actually having to have that detail there. And we'll just go ahead, we'll load that in. So we've got a sci-fi normal. Where'd you go? Where did you go? It'd be this one right here. All right, so sci-fi texture normal. All right, so we add that in, let it import. All right, so we got a normal map. Again, you can set the amount of normal here, and you can see the immediate results on it. Again, we're dealing with some low polygon assets, and generally, with the lower polygon assets, you don't get a ton of influence by normal map. And then finally, we have something called emission maps that are set up here. And we can bring those in as well. So these are a way of casting light sources into the scene from a texture map. So we'll go ahead and once again, we'll load that in. You'll notice again, it's under textures, and we've got 4 sets of emission maps as well. So we're gonna go ahead and bring that in as well. We're not gonna see much effect as of yet, but we'll come back to that a little bit later. You can add the strength of it right here. You can also set the emission color right there. All right, so we got that guy, we're good. We got a little bit of energy coming out, emission color set. All right, so we're good. All right, so there we go, all set. Now we're going to do 2 things here. First off, like I said earlier on, as long as you're going to keep with the same set, you're going to use the same albedo map, the same normal map, the same specular maps, and so on, since they're reshared between all of the buildings, your easiest thing to do is actually go ahead and save this map. So we'll call this sci-fi buildings. So that's a set of textures that can be easily applied to other models after the fact. So we got that done. Now we just need to go ahead and save this guy. So our scene is done. So we'll go ahead and do a save the scene. It's going to default to the name of it, and we're good with that. So now we have our bank ready to go. You'll notice over here, so we have all of our FBX, but now we've just created a new scene here that we could move that into a subfolder or whatever, and now we can close this guy down. So we're going to just go ahead. So this right now is the FBX version, and we don't want that again because it doesn't have the textures or all the other stuff set up. So we're going to just delete that, get rid of it, and instead we'll do is instance in our scene. So there you go. We now have an object in the scene. We are good to go, and we can start working from here. So first off, what we're going to probably want to do is make sure that this guy is, above ground and in a way that makes sense. And we're going to build everything relative to it. So there is our first guy in the world, and we now have also that material we can work from, and that's good. So now what we can do is easily bring in another item. So one sec. All right, I believe it was called food hole. So let me just search here. Food, yeah. SN building food hole. Okay, so we're gonna bring this guy in, and it's basically the same particular process. This is a small shack for food, another building we can use in our mix, but setting this guy up is gonna be a lot easier. So we're gonna go into this guy. Oops, I accidentally parented him to the bank. Make sure that you select root when you bring a new guy in, because that's how it's gonna set up. But this guy is actually only temporary because we're actually going to create a scene for it as well. So let's get rid of that mask down there. Zoom this guy out so we're back to the root. All right, so what we're gonna do is create a TSCN file for this food shack now, but like I mentioned earlier on, it will be much easier this time. So open it up, create an inherited version of it, like so. Select the guy, the mesh instance down here, and then we just wanna go ahead and materials, and instead of having to go through all that work, we basically just load in the other asset, and boom, we're good to go. So now we have our building. We'll go ahead and make a save of that guy, shut that guy down, come back here, we'll get rid of that guy in from the scene, and now we can start placing food holes in our world. So where did food hole go? Oh, yeah, food hole, boom, there we go. So now we can go ahead, once again, make sure that these values make sense. I'm good with that. We'll set this guy up relative to this guy over here. By the way, orbit with middle mouse button. You can use the transform manipulators. You can also toggle between them up here. So let's just slide that guy back. All right, good. So there we go. We have 2 buildings in our scene, and really the rest is just kind of a matter of adding more and more and more of them. Now what we're going to do is go ahead and bring in a road piece. And once again, if we go into FBX, you're going to find that there is a ton of stuff in there. So we're going to just search for road, and what I want is called SM Road 2 yellow lines. All right, this guy right here. So we just bring that guy in, and now we're going to have to set it up as well. Now this guy isn't a building. It uses a different set of textures, but otherwise exact same process. So go on here, edit it, new inherited, select the material, go ahead, select the mesh instance, go back to material. We're gonna create a new one here. So once again, so a new spatial material, double click it, and then under the albedo channel for this guy, we're just gonna go ahead and set load textures, and since this is a road, we want to get the road version. So there's the normal map, and there is the road texture. Not a lot going on with this guy, but boom, there we go. So now we have our texture on our road, and we'll go ahead and set up the normal map for it as well, and that's about it. So we'll go ahead, normal turns on, and set up the normal map. So here, textures, road, normal, done. All right, so there is our road ready to be used. Once again, we'll go ahead and save this guy out. Now we can either I'm not going to use any more road tiles, so I'm just going to take this guy as it is. I'm not going to save the material out because this is the only road tile we're going to use it in our particular game. And so we'll go ahead and save that scene. There we go. Yeah, we're fine with road. We'll exit this out. And once again, delete the FBX file, So now what we're going to find is we're going to be creating a lot of road segments here. Well, not a ton, but if you were, what you probably want to do is actually go up here to your root node and add another node underneath. This is just a folder of sorts. It doesn't actually do anything. It's just a parent for everything we're going to use. I'm just going to go up here and rename it to roads. And now with roads selected, like so, we just bring in our newly created scene file. So let me just minimize the FBXs. Oh, I still have this on. By the way, don't keep that on. It gets confusing fast. All right, so turn our filter off. Scroll back to our thing. We've got our other scene here. So now we're just going to bring our road and drop it into the scene. The other big thing we want to do, once again, is make sure that we're at 0. So everything is kind of at the same particular height. And there is a road for us to work with. And obviously you would use multiple roads. So there is your middle line. You could create 2 of these to have them back to back, create a more elaborate road. Oops, wrong axis. But now we've got that in the world. It is created in our roads folder. And now let's just structure that like so. So now it is lined up. Let's bring it to the front of our building. Give it a look around, make sure that we're looking good. All right, good. So we have our road and we are good to go. Now, like as I mentioned earlier on, we need to have a ton of roads. So what we're gonna do is just basically clone this guy again and again and again. So with it selected, hit Control D, which will create a duplicate. And you'll notice it's automatically created in our roads folder. And then just kind of move it so that it is lined up and looks good. And then we just basically wanna keep doing that. So, oh, did not wanna do that. All right, so we've got first one done. And then let's pan over a bit. So that was just shift middle mouse button, by the way. Do a Control D. Out you go. And then Control D. And then you notice I'm using the arrows to constrain it to a given axis. That makes things a lot easier when doing this kind of work. Control D. And then you could also do it, obviously, in the other direction. Control D. And have your road going on that way. Obviously, you would use multiple road pieces, set up intersections, and so on. And as I mentioned earlier on, you may want to do this on the opposite side. So we could do something like this, create our double lanes. So here, and then we'll do a transform. So what is that? So minus 90. I want to do 180 degrees from that. So I want to go to positive 90, like so. So there, we could set up an opposite road in the opposite direction, like that, and then just basically keep going. So then Control D. And then off we go, and you can have your roads set up that way, create more of a realistic road. Obviously, I'm not going to create everything because it'll get really boring to watch, but you get the idea of what we're dealing with here. So that is how you basically start instancing a bunch of the same asset. So now what we need to get into our world is a camera, and this is really important when you're dealing with 3D scenes, as the camera is pretty much the heartblood. So we're going back to the root here, and we're just going to go ahead and add a new node, search for camera, like so, and then create a camera. And then ta-da, there is our camera in the scene. Now what you can actually do is click at any time and see a preview of what the camera sees. Now this obviously isn't the most convenient things at time because you've got this one window to work with. So what we're gonna do is go here to view and we'll set it up to double work view. So we've got our camera selected in the top one, and what we're gonna do is turn on preview in the bottom. So now what we're seeing, what our camera sees down here, and we can actually control it up here. Obviously, you saw up here, we had a number of different options. We could do a quad view if we so wish. I'm gonna go back to 2. That's really all I need. And now we just position our camera in a way that makes things look good. By the way, if you want to move things relative to themselves as opposed to the world, so now that I've rotated, if I want to have the movement go that way, you just toggle that little guy right there. All right? So once you got things set up how you like, and we want to do maybe a little bit of a rotate down so we'll look down on our scene. Boom, there you go. So we've got a bit of a building and scene and environment coming together. We've got our main camera in the world, which is a good thing to have. You can configure the settings for it up here so you can change the way that it projects the field of view. You can see the field of view effect down here immediately. So field of view, near clipping plane. So this is how far it can see. Like that. That's basically the fall off distance for this camera. But the key thing that you're probably going to want to do right now is set up a world environment. And there's a ton of stuff in the environment. So this is basically your rendering settings. So with your camera created, go in here and go drop down new environment. And we're going to probably just straight away, we're going to edit our environment, and I'm just going to do a save. So let's save this guy, and we'll call it world environment. By the way, you can have multiple, so if you want to switch between them, you different settings and so on, you can easily do so. Now, you notice the minute we created this guy, our world looks kind of terrible. So what the hell happened? Well, there's all kinds of settings going on here. So you can set the clear background setting. So if you wait that things work in the background, you can have a clear color, you can have it have a skybox, custom sky, canvas, and so on. In this particular case, we'll keep it clear because we're going to change things out after the fact. But what you probably want to do is get some light into the world. So here's your ambient light setting. So let's add a natural light, and then you can see the strength of that light. So this is just the light that bounces around the world. This is when there is no light at all. This is the light that will light the scene. So we'll start with a very lowish, so let's do 0.2. All right, so we have a light source in the scene. By the way, if you want to go for a bit of a noir or sci-fi look, maybe you want to have a blue light, or a bluish tint, you can change the effect of that light right there easily enough. But we're actually going to get in and set up lights in just a second. It's bothering me that that isn't flush to the road. All right, so there we go. Back to our environment. So world environment, click that guy. So that is ambient light that's being set up, and there's a ton of stuff that's here that's important. If you want to have fog in your world, you can see immediately the results of it, a whole bunch of configuration settings for how fog is set up. You have auto exposure on and off, and then you can change the amount, the maximums, the speed of the exposure. I'm going to turn that off. That's simulating camera effects. I always forget exactly what this acronym stands for. Screen space ambient occlusion. It's a way of calculating light in the scene. We can go ahead and enable that one. Yeah. So you kind of want to go ahead and play around with these things. You can find out what they do almost by just turning them on and off, and then just playing around with the settings to get the rendering settings that you like. You want a little bit more tone mapping, you can do so. And it really kind of is, you're going to be trying to get the look of your world. Now, remember earlier on when I had it where once my guy drove away a certain distance that it blurred out? Well, that is depth of field far view. So you can turn that on, and you can see immediately it's kicking in. So that distance is way too close. So we can play around with that, but we need to have a few things in the background. So what we're going to do now is come back here. We're going to create another object. So what are they actually called? Building background. So we got large and medium buildings for the background. So we'll just go ahead and create a large background building, like so. The textures on that are very wrong, but so that instance in the scene, it's very simple and straightforward. I accidentally created that in the wrong spot here. So we've got our background building going on right there. What we want to do is, once again, edit it, new inherited. Sorry, one sec. Okay, fresh drink of water. All right, so here we go. We got it in the background. We want to select the material once again, and then this time it's a different polygon set. So we're going to come here, once again, spatial. The albedo setting, we come down here, we just want to go ahead and load in, and you're going to find that there is a texture set for the background. So that one is sci-fi background buildings, and I believe there is another one to go with it for emission, but maybe not. Okay, no, maybe it's just this one. All right, so we're going to set that guy up, and there you see we now have textures for it. Now we can go ahead, we'll save that guy out, and I think we're going to bring in another background. So we'll save this, we'll call this background texture. All right, so we got our scene done. We'll go ahead and save that guy. So sure, that's a background image. We're going to take the FBX that came in that is all fouled up. We'll delete that guy out. And then once again, let's collapse this guy down, grab our background building, and just drop it into the scene. All right, it's there. Move you into the background, and then you just basically start populating the skyline in your world. And really low polygon images going on there, and we could just create a couple of them. As you saw, there was big buildings, small buildings, various different ones. I'm just going to go ahead and create a few instances of this guy to make it just look like we got things going on in the background. And once again, I'm just doing this using Control D and then moving things around. There you go. So we now have things in our background that we can look at. Makes it seem like our world is a bit more alive. So this is the stuff that would be just off on the horizon. It's really low polygon. Your character is never going to interact with it, but it does give you a sense of depth in the world. So now that we've got those guys there, we can actually start looking back to, so here, let's go back to our game background. And now you'll notice, oh no, not game background, sorry, my environment. So I want to open up my environment. So world environment. So now this is where that depth of field far comes in. So if you want to have it so that when things start getting far away, they see the blur effect that is being applied. And you can also pick the amount of blur that is being applied in the background. So if you kind of want things to get a little hazy in the background, kind of give you that, again, depth of blur effect, that is how it's done. All right, so we've covered the environment, setting up the camera. We've got background stuff going on. We've got, we created some roads. We created some buildings. Now let's look at creating some light. So start off, first off, we're going to actually bring in a light model. So say, search for light. So street light of some kind. All right, so I want SM prop street light. Where did you go? Oh, there it is. All right, so bring this guy in, and you know the deal by now. So you can see it. It's not actually huge. It's just way off in the front. So let's bring this guy into the world. We'll move it back towards 0. All right. So there we go. Let's move this so that's actually part of root. What you'd probably want to do now, if you're doing a bunch of lights too, it would probably make sense to create another node off of the root called, so it's a node like this, and we'll call that lights. In this case, I'm probably only going to make that one light, but we actually haven't set it up now, right? We're still dealing with the FBX at this point in time. So let's just select that guy in. We'll bring him forward. So there is our street light. What we want to do, once again, open this guy up like so. New inherited. There is it. Looking good. Looking good. I don't know why it's not looking good over here. So let's bring that guy in. There we go. All right. So there is our street light. Once again, we need to set up the maps on it. You know the drill by now. So basically, just come on in here and go to materials. And in this particular case, it's localized. So I'm going to create a new spatial material. Open that up. Albedo channel. Load. Textures. And there's one here somewhere for lights. 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 Oh, I lied. Must still be part of this one. All right, there you go. So you see we got our texturing going on. We're using our standard building texture. And we are pretty good to go. Now, the reality here, though, is our light is just a model at this point. That's obviously not what we want. So let's go. And as I mentioned early on, when you create your own TSCN files, you can start adding or changing them. So that's what we're going to do right now. We're going to go ahead and come in here, and we're going to add in a light. So we got a bunch of different options. We've got a spotlight, omni light, which is a light that goes in all direction. A directional light, which is something like your sun. So we want a spotlight in this case. So we got a spotlight in our world. We just want to go ahead, set that guy up. So I want to, all right, so I want to rotate it 90 degrees on the x-axis, I think. Nope. 270 degrees on the x-axis, so it is now pointing down. We will bring this guy upright. It's very hard to see with the two views, by the way. So what we want to do basically is set our light so that it is in our light, like so. All right, so our light source is going to come out of our light. So this means every instance of the street light that we make will come with its own light source. Now, what you're probably noticing here is our little cone coming down. Well, this is the fall off of the light. We probably want the light to at least get to the ground underneath it. So we got a couple things we can set here. We got the range, so this is how far down it will go. We got the attenuation. You can see the effect of it in action on the base of the light down there. We got the angle, so this is how dispersed your light is. You can see the cone being updated as I change that. And then we've got fine-tune control over the angle attenuation. And we've got also other options here, so we could set the light color. So if we wanted for some reason this to be a red light, a neon light, or so on, we can set that here. We've got, does it have shadowing or not? We'll keep it as it is right now. So we're good to go. We now have a light with a light source in it. And I'm just going to go ahead and save that guy. So we got, yep, it's prop street light. We're good. All right. So now we'll come back to our scene. Once again, grab our existing light. Where did you go? Light. There it is. Delete it. All right. Select our lights folder. And now we can just start adding them into our world. So first things first, let's bring a light in right here. Drop it into the scene like so. And there, boom, we have light. So we can start now, you know, we probably want to actually position it so that it makes sense. But we can start putting lights in our world. And there immediately in the preview, you can actually see the effect of our light as we're moving around. You can also see it right here. The other cool thing that we've actually got as an option is we can come up here to perspective, and we can actually say cinematic preview. So then you kind of get a shot of how it's going to look when you're done. Now you can't move this guy around. You got to stop that in order to get back to work, but you can actually see a nice shot of how the lighting and the environment and all of that stuff will affect each other. So there is the simple process of controlling the light. So now let's go ahead and we'll just do a Control D, bring that light back here to this other end, like so. And now we have some more lighting in our world. It's a very nice thing. And at this point in time, once you've actually got some light sources, you may want to go back to your world environment. And so let's just filter that one down. So back to your world environment that you defined earlier on. And now you might want to play around with the ambient lighting in your scene. So now you may not even need it. And you just kind of want to configure it so it's at the lighting level that you want. Yeah. Now, one of the cool things that's going on with the light, and this might not necessarily work for having all of the lights sharing a common setting, but let's say we want to add a little bit of fun to this guy. So let's just open that scene back up. So where is our light scene? Sim prop street light. All right, so we open our light back up. And now what we're going to do is actually add a little bit of an animation to this guy. Nothing really that special. We can animate how the light is handling. So I'm going to show you how you can basically extend these scenes once you've got them. So let's come up here. We'll go ahead and we'll add an animation player into the scene, like so. All right, we're good to go. Now with the animation selected, just go ahead and create a new one, and we'll call this light animation. All right, so boom, we got it in. Now we can go ahead and start keyframing out properties that we want to go. So you see over here with the light setting, so spotlight is set. You're going to notice there's little keys beside everybody. So now what we can do is go ahead and set, let's key on the, I don't know, energy maybe? Yeah, let's key on the energy. So we're going to just go ahead and we'll hit the key here and we'll create a new animation here. So see, we've got 1 second so far. We can go down here. Let's create this over 4 seconds, and we're going to automatically loop, and then we're going to set this guy right here, which means it will play this animation as soon as we start. So there we go. So our key is fine. So we want to set our default key, so our light is at 1.27 when we start. What I'm going to do is move to the 2 second mark, and I'm going to hit this. So I'm going to right click here, say insert a new key. So we have a new key here. When you select it, it'll automatically take the keyed value, and then you can go ahead and play with it. So we can set up, we could turn it off, for example, and then right over here, come back here, you can set a new key, and then turn it back to 1.27. 1.27, 0, 1.27. Now, if you want it to be more abrupt, what you're going to probably want to do is actually create like a key here, and then the key, a frame here. So set that guy to basically full bright, so 1.27, and then that guy to 1.27, and then you got this guy in the middle, which is off. So what you're going to have is light, light, off, light, on. So what we do, go ahead and save that guy out. So once again, important settings, automatically turn it on and have it loop automatically when you're going. So we've just defined that into our scene. So now when you come and look at your scene, sorry, one sec, I keep having to pause my throat. All right, let's go ahead and do a play. So we haven't set our scene up yet, so we're gonna have to set scenes. So my scene is the scene. Go ahead and load it. And you'll notice there is now flickering lights. So that is one of the neat, easy effects you can do. But you'll notice here again, they're being done at the global level. So that means that every single street light is going to flick at the same time, which may not be the performance you wanted to have. So what you may want to do instead is have it done on the instance level. So you could come back here, you could take all of those values out of here and instead have done them here in the scene, and then only so I would add an animation player to this guy, and only that animation will occur to that light and not all of the lights in the scene. So you're going to have to decide between doing things at an instance level or doing things more globally. Yeah, is that about it? We covered quite a bit of ground here. The only other thing I think I'll actually go ahead and show you is let's set up an emissive light. So this actually gives you a lot of that Blade Runner feel going on. So we're going to come here, back to the FBX files. All right, FBX, we're going to search for neon. So we're going to bring in a neon sign. I'm going to bring in the 7th one. I got no idea what that actually is. Let's drop one of those in the scene. So there it is. What are you? Oh, you're a martini. All right, good. I can use the exact same one I did before. All right, so now we're going to set this guy up again. Once again, since it's an FBX file, we're going to want to create an inherited version of it. Set up the materials on it. So boom. And then we're here, go with materials. Let's set up a new one. So new spatial material. Click that guy. Albedo channel. Let's come down here. Load it up. Textures. This is a neon sign. So neon sign right there. Actually, let me just check while I was in there. I don't know if there was any other things for neon. No, I think that's what we want. Okay, good. So we got our texture set up for this guy and done. Now what we're going to do with this, so you can see here we've got this cool little effect going on. What we're going to do is add some emission to it. So this actually makes this guy into a light source. So we're going to come here. We're purplish, so let's go with a purple light. That. So boom, now we're giving off light. And then the amount that it gives off can be determined by the emissive value. And the cool thing here is, once again, this can be animated. So we want to come up here, we can go ahead, and we can say, add an oops, that was actually already on animation player, wasn't it? Animation player. Add an animation player to this guy. Create a new animation. Neon sign. Like so. We'll make it 1.5 long. That. We'll start it automatically. We'll loop it. And then with that set, we'll just go ahead and select our guy again. Go back into the material settings for it. And with the emission set there, we can go ahead, energy, create a key. And let's see, duplicate that key, drag that to the end. Oops, to the beginning. Why did you not actually duplicate? All right, so now we're going to do it. Drop in here, somewhere in the middle. And we'll insert a key there. And then we'll insert a key there. And we'll grab this key, and we're going to way up the neonness. All right, so there we go. And we will save that guy like so. Our neon sign is ready. Go back over here to the world. We'll drop the FBX version out of the world like so. And we'll create a new version of our neon sign. So neon sign, drop that in the world. There we go. So our food place is now a martini shop. Just drag that. Oops, that's not what I want. All right, here we go. Drag that up like that, over like that, and our animation should be in effect. And there you see the lights are strobing in and out while we have our street lights are flickering. Yeah. And one final thing to cover before I call it wraps on this one. We have our emissive light, but it's not actually doing anything yet. We need to add one more thing to our world. And we're just come up here and we're going to add a GIProbe, or global illumination. So this allows us to have real-time global illumination in our scene. Just set that up. You'll notice it sets up this volume of what is affected. And we're pretty good with the street area as it is. So just have it surround the area that you want it to. By the way, if you want the gizmo to show or hide, you can turn gizmos off this way. So if you want GIProbe to not actually be shown, you can easily turn it off that way in the view menu. But you'll notice here, now with the GIProbe selected, we have another option up here called Bake GIProbe. So GIProbe selected. You've also got some options for it, the range, the energy level, bias, and so on. Are you inside or outside? We're outside in this particular case, and so on. Again, just play around with it until you get a setting you like. But once you've got that GIProbe selected, go ahead and bake your lighting. And then now we are done. It's not the greatest thing you have ever seen in the entire universe, but it's interesting. It's a little ugly because it's one of those things. In order to get something to look good, you're going to have to spend time playing around with the settings, to play around with the lighting in the scene, to play around with the ambient lighting. You're actually going to probably get your most bang for the buck playing around in here, changing out the lighting in the world, the strength of the lighting in the world. You bring that down, and it's going to immediately have a huge impact on your world. Ditto for playing around, having fog, if you so want it, having set in. Your tone mapping, you can change out and really get a different look. So now we change to a filmic tone map. It's going to look a little bit more Blade Runner-y. Again, trying to balance low polygon and Blade Runner realistic look is going to be a challenge. But as you see, with just a few small tweaks, we got a massively different looking world here. And the way that you really make something look good, ultimately, is in lighting. If you want to rely a little bit less on the ambient light and more on having actual lights in your world, you'll probably get a better end result, to be honest, getting rid of the ambient light and creating an indirect light for your sun and positioning it correctly. But again, those are things, just sort of play around with it until you get it how you want it to look. And yeah, that's kind of essentially it. We covered a whole lot here, but in a very informal manner. If you have any big questions here, do let me know. I will try my best to handle them. I'm going to probably cover a couple of these topics in a whole lot more detail in individual videos, because we covered a broad swath of stuff today. But hopefully what you saw was at least somewhat interesting. And once again, all of the assets I used in this guy, we used like 1% of one pack. This is all from the Humble Bundle that is currently still running. So if you're interested, check that out. I will throw the link down below. There's still like 13 days left. And the cool thing is, once again, they added it so that now if you go ahead to your purchases directory, instead of just having the zip file, there's also the sources version, which is what we worked with today. It makes it really easy to work with the Godot engine in addition to other game engines. And having these assets to work with does make throwing together this kind of stuff a whole lot easier. Or, you know what, if you've got a bit more time, a bit more polish, you end up with this kind of stuff, which does look a little bit better. And the lighting was set up a little bit stronger, so you can actually see some of the influences in action. It's a cool prototyping tool, even if you don't use these assets for the games. Just having assets sometime to learn how to do this kind of stuff makes learning this stuff so much easier. So again, I will link that down below. But if there's a specific topic I kind of glossed over on you today, or you had any questions about something I did, please let me know in the comments down below. I'll try to answer them there, or perhaps in another video. But anyways, that was basic 3D in the Godot game engine. Hope you found that useful, and I will talk to you all later. Goodbye.